Hello, thank you for joining us. We're seeing you all come into the webinar. So thank you for sharing your afternoon with us. We're gonna get started in a few minutes. We're just gonna let some more people join before we get going. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I think we're just gonna hold about one more minute before we get going. And hopefully a few more folks can jump on. Great. I think we're up to 40 attendees right now. So I think we're set to begin. Do you want to take over for?
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Adopt a Landmark Fund 2021 pre-submission meeting. My name is Diana Cavallo. I'm with the Department of Planning and Development, Historic Preservation Division. We're excited to see so many participants with us. Thank you for attending. With me today are my colleagues, Dan Kleiber, Canlin Hahn. I believe Sophia Carey might be joining us as well. I would also like to introduce the Commissioner of the Department of Planning and Development, Maurice Cox. Commissioner Cox, would you like to say a few words before we start with our program?
Sure, happy to. Thanks everyone for joining us and for your interest in this Adopt a Landmark Fund, which I think is an extraordinary tool for reinvigorating historic neighborhood landmarks. So a little bit about how I come to this and why preservation is so kind of near and dear to my heart. It goes back a very long time ago. Some of you may know that I lived and worked as an architect in Florence, Italy, for 10 years of my life. And I think, as many of you who know the beauty of Italian cities, if that doesn't make a preservationist out of you, I don't know what will. And so when I returned to the United States, I settled in Charlottesville, Virginia, and I bought a historic home in a majority African-American neighborhood. It was built in 1876. And I found that there were many buildings of that historic character that were in majority African-American communities. But what was interesting about my experience is that the majority white neighborhoods of Charlottesville, Virginia had long since been protected by landmark districts, while the neighborhood that I bought a house in had not. And so my home was singularly designated, but there was nothing to prevent the rest of the historic homes on in my neighborhood from being demolished. And so I worked tirelessly to advocate for the neighborhood being designated historic. And it is today a thriving, still African-American neighborhood. But I remember the challenges that we faced in getting the resources to owners of these historic structures who could not really meet the moment and the demand of being stewards for these amazing buildings. And so I really set my goal to try to find ways to bring resources to folks who are stewarding these historic assets and being good stewards, investing in them to be able to hand them on to the next generation. So here in Chicago, I think we're really blessed with over 60 designated landmark districts. And I think there are over 360 individual Chicago landmarks. And each of these structures tell a story about the history of the families who live there, about Chicago, about the neighborhood, and about the people of Chicago. So it is our interest to find buildings throughout historic neighborhoods that are under threat, that might be subject to demolition if adequate resources are not brought. And so that's where the Adopt a Landmark Fund comes in. I think with the support of the Commission on Chicago Landmarks, we are poised now to be able to offer $6 million in support to private developers or owners to rehabilitate landmark buildings. I think with a very, very strong preference for neighborhood anchoring buildings and neighborhood commercial districts. So this is really, in some ways, an expansion of what we might normally think are, preservation worthy. We have amazing intact mercantile streets, commercial districts. We'd like to see these resources used for that portfolio. We have amazing iconic buildings, bank buildings, theaters, churches, fire stations, all kinds of historic assets that I think are those kind of silent witnesses and make all of our neighborhoods so much richer. So we want to dispel the notion that it's only for high architecture that we are hoping to support. In fact, we're talking about the buildings that you pass by every day on your walk, on your daily errands, to the grocery store, to the bus stop, to the pharmacy, to the coffee shop. And so we feel really strongly that these are the buildings in neighborhoods that give a sense of place. And we intend that from Wicker Park to Austin to Inglewood and beyond. And it is it's been really fascinating to see as the Invest Southwest initiative, Mayor Lightfoot's effort for revitalization and reinvestment in the South Side and the West Side. When we asked residents, where should we start? They inevitably said the Laramie Bank on Chicago Avenue and Laramie, or the fire station in Inglewood, or Pioneer Bank on North Avenue. They naturally gravitated to those buildings, many of them that had been shuttered, but really they felt grounded the story of their neighborhoods. So I'm just thrilled to see what preservation projects will be proposed in every neighborhood across the city through this grant program. And I just thank you for your commitment to the preservation movement in Chicago. And thank you, Deanna and the preservation team for the work you do to lift up programs like this and get them into the right hands. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Koss. So now we'll turn this over to Dan. He will give an overview of the Adopt a Landmark Fund, the 2021 priority and evaluation criteria, as well as submission requirements. Following Dan's presentation, we would be happy to respond to any questions you may have. Thank you.
I just wanted to mention too that If you have any questions for the panel, please use the Q&A box, and this group will be able to either answer you live or type in a response if it's something quick. So just keep adding your questions to there throughout the program, and they'll get back to you. Thank you.
Hi, can you hear me okay and see? Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes,
Great.
we can. Thanks, Dan.
Great. Hi, everyone. Dan Kleiber with the Department of Planning and Development Historic Preservation Division. Thank you for attending today's overview of the 2021 Adopt a Landmark funding round. I want to note right at the onset some of the most important details of today's presentation. One, that an overview of the Adopt a Landmark program and the relatively simple 4-page 2021 Adopt a Landmark application itself can be found at www.chicago.gov/AAL. Number two, applications are due by Monday, August 16th at 4:00 p.m. And finally, this year, there is indeed $6 million in total funding available. And now for some background on the Adopt a Landmark program. Citywide Adopt a Landmark program funds are generated by the Neighborhood Opportunity Bonus. The Neighborhood Opportunity Bonus, established in 2016, offers increased development rights for projects located in downtown zoning districts in exchange for payments to the 3 Neighborhood Opportunity Bonus funds. 80% of the funds are allocated to the Neighborhood Opportunity Fund. 10% of the funds go to the Local Impact Fund, and 10% to the Adopt a Landmark Fund. Per the Chicago zoning ordinance, to be considered for funding, Adopt a Landmark projects must be consistent with landmark guidelines. Individual projects and scopes must be approved by the Commission on Chicago Landmarks, and funds must be used for substantial interior work within a portion of a building that is open to the public, or exterior renovation work that is visible from a public street, or both. The work must exceed normal maintenance work. In addition, DPD gives priority to projects that have not been completed and that address exterior envelope issues. The department may also establish other funding priorities by rule. This year, the department has established a new funding priority for Adopt a Landmark projects, which the Commission approved at its May 2021 meeting: Neighborhood Anchors and Neighborhood Commercial. What are neighborhood anchors and neighborhood commercial? First of all, both neighborhood anchors and neighborhood commercial buildings could either be individually designated Chicago landmarks or contributing buildings within designated Chicago landmark districts. Neighborhood anchors were targeted for the positive stabilizing role they play in so many Chicago neighborhoods. A neighborhood anchor landmark building is a center or an aspiring center of community life. They could be gathering places for residents of a neighborhood, either formally through, for example, the provision of program social services or religious events, or informally through spontaneous gatherings. Some examples of neighborhood anchor landmark buildings include institutions, legacy businesses, field houses, restaurants, religious buildings, and similar social gathering places. I do want to be clear here, the images shown above are simply representative examples of neighborhood anchors. What is neighborhood commercial? These landmark buildings were targeted for the positive role they play in promoting pedestrian activity, small business establishments, and local commerce. Neighborhood commercial landmark buildings are generally small-scale commercial buildings and/or mixed-use buildings with residential uses on upper floors and ground floor retail commercial uses. And again, the images shown above are simply representative examples of neighborhood commercial buildings. In addition to the funding priority of neighborhood anchors and neighborhood commercial just discussed, DPD will further evaluate projects submitted this year based on how many of the following 7 criteria are met, which I will now review. It should be noted that these are not in any particular order and are all weighted equally. Projects that have not been completed and that address exterior envelope issues. projects that are located within qualified investment areas with priority to projects that are also in Invest Southwest community areas. Qualified investment areas are areas designated as low to moderate income areas as determined by census data. A map of both the qualified investment areas, highlighted with the hatch marks, and the Invest Southwest community area boundaries in purple is in front of you. Links to separate versions of these maps, as well as information on the qualified investment areas and Invest Southwest program, can actually be found right in the Adopt a Landmark application itself on page 4. And if you have difficulty in determining if your property is in one or both of these areas, feel free to email us at landmarks@cityofchicago.org. The next two evaluation criteria: projects that leverage additional project investment, such that the requested Adopt a Landmark funds fill financing gaps. Projects that will have a positive catalytic impact on the community in which they are located. The impact may be in the form of new permanent jobs created, commercial leasing to new businesses, providing new services such as soup kitchens, adult education, training, after-school programs, childcare, etc. And the last three criteria: projects that address or prevent further deterioration of the subject property's structural and architectural integrity caused by natural misfortune, such as storm damage, fire, flooding, etc., or buildings that are situationally threatened as determined on a case-by-case basis. Projects that will rehabilitate vacant or underutilized buildings to make them ready for occupancy or improve their occupancy. This may include an interior and exterior scope of work with Adopt a Landmark funds to be used for qualified exterior work. And projects that are shovel-ready and will be completed within 2 years. This next slide is the complete list of all of the evaluation criteria that we just went over. Again, the application submitted to the department will be reviewed for completeness and conformance with the funding priority and how many of the evaluation criteria are met. Applications selected to receive Adopt a Landmark fund grants shall be presented to the Commission for review and approval of the scope of work and associated budget. Once a project is approved, the property owner receiving the funds must enter into an agreement with the city and the Commission regarding the manner in which the funds will be used. Any funds that have not been used upon completion of the restoration project shall be returned to the citywide Adopt a Landmark fund and applied to other eligible landmark restoration project costs. Projects selected that need Adopt a Landmark fund grants over $250,000 will require approval of the City Council and must comply with the city's MBE, WBE, and local hiring requirements, as well as applicable Illinois prevailing wage requirements. In terms of submission requirements, page 3 of the application details all of the items that we will need with each application. A letter requesting the funds and a narrative of the project that describes the overall project, the project timeline, including start and end dates, and any time constraints affecting the project, as well as an explanation of why Adopt a Landmark funds are needed. 11 by 17 inch existing and proposed plans, elevations, and details of the project to the extent available. 3D color renderings as applicable. Itemized project budget and written scope of work. The budget should separate hard costs from soft costs and must include line items for title company escrow fees and a third-party A&E firm to monitor disbursements of escrow funds. Please also identify the basis of the cost estimates for the proposed work. For example, A&E estimates, contractors estimates, bids, etc. Projects needing Adopt a Landmark fund grants over $250,000 must comply with the city's MBE, WBE, and local hiring requirements and applicable Illinois prevailing wage requirements. Identified sources of funds as applicable for project costs not covered by Adopt a Landmark funds, as well as other project phases if the project requesting Adopt a Landmark funds is one phase of a multi-phase project. In addition, the applications will need photographs of the property and areas of the proposed work, exterior wall condition assessment reports and Department of Building violations as applicable, list of consultants, contractors, professionals to be retained and their credentials, relevant past experience with historic buildings, projects, etc. List of any other financial incentives received or that may be received, and the application can be submitted or to be submitted for the project. Economic disclosure statement and affidavit. And please note on page 1 to 2 of the EDS, the applicant, as well as each entity holding a beneficial ownership interest as defined therein, must complete an EDS. EDS forms can be found on the city's website at chicago.gov/EDS. Finally, documentation or other information to address the funding priority and evaluation criteria listed on page 4. In conclusion, again, the due date for the applications is August 16th, which is a Monday, at 4:00 p.m. And also, to obtain an overview of the program as well as the application itself, please go to the website listed above, chicago.gov/AAL. Any questions, as I indicated earlier, can always be sent via email to landmarks@cityofchicago.org. Thank you, and we can now address any questions that you may have.
Deanna, did you want me to go ahead and read out the questions that have come in through the question and answer box?
Yes, please. Go ahead, Kenwood.
Okay, great. Deanna, this may be for you. Can a project be funded by both the Adopt a Landmark Fund and the Neighborhood Fund?
There is nothing to prevent other sources of funds to be included in a project stack or particular application that you're proposing. The only thing that we would look for is to make sure that the work that is going to be done to the building does include costs that would could be attributed to either of those costs, so that we're not double dipping, I guess, is the best answer.
Okay, great. Next question that has come in. I'm a senior citizen, 92 years young, lifelong resident of the 4th Ward. How can I contact someone who has already applied and received funding in the past and is willing to work with a senior citizen? I would say Daniel or Deanna, do you want to take that one?
So just to make sure that I am understanding, are you looking for help in preparing an application for a property that you own? Because that may be something we can help with, putting you in touch with folks that might be able to provide advice. So if you would like to email us at the, and let us know what your information is or any specific help that you're requesting, and we can see how best to provide that assistance. I hope I answered the question in this.
Deanna, just so it's handy with your statement, what email should they use?
So that was Dan just had an email on our, Dan, if you could just repeat the email, please.
Of course, they should use landmarks@cityofchicago.org.
Okay, great. The next question from Mr. Lee, will a residence in the Kenwood Historic Landmark District be eligible?
So as just presented, the priority is for neighborhood anchor buildings and neighborhood commercial buildings. That is a very important distinction and understanding to make. And the application should really address how the property that you are inquiring about meets that priority. There is also the evaluation criteria that does require that the work that is being done would need to be to the exterior and any portion of the interior that's open to the public. So generally, it just depends on how well you fit the funding priority and how you can respond to the 7 evaluation criteria. But as long as you're a Chicago landmark, contributing building in a landmark district, and can demonstrate that you comply with the priority, you should be able to apply.
Great. Okay. The next question from Antoinette Wright is, when will awards be announced?
So we anticipate that we will have decisions this fall. It probably will be at least 2 months after the deadline for the applications.
Okay. Next question from Carol Wilkins. Do you have a list of approved consultants, contractors, professionals who have worked on historic buildings in Chicago in the past?
It's a very good question. We are not able to provide a list due to just conflicts of interest, but we can certainly point you into other resources, such as Landmarks Illinois, that publishes a resource guide that has various consultants and contractors listed, and maybe others, so that you can reach out to others who can help with putting together some recommendations for you.
Okay, great. Daniel, I think this one is probably best for you. What are the most common mistakes made by applicants for an Adopt a Landmark grant?
I would say the most common mistakes, just not necessarily a mistake, but I think timing is very crucial, especially on the execution side of our agreement. It's important to budget your time with your overall project. I mean, that's something that we would like to see. As we said, one of the evaluation criteria is we want to see that the project can be completed within 2 years. We do have several submission requirements and kind of paperwork requirements too, as part of our Adopt a Landmark agreement. So I think it's important to, and we will work very closely with the selected applicants on delivering a fully executed agreement with you. But just do know that there are some time constraints that you have to be thinking about, especially when working with us on executing the agreement. Build those into your overall time frame.
And as they get into the process, Daniel, they could ask you maybe some more details about those timeframes, right?
Of course, of course. I think the other, just as may sound obvious from our presentation, but properties must be individually designated Chicago landmarks, currently and or located within landmark districts. That's a basic tenet of this program.
Okay, great. Gabriella, I'm not sure if you're still there. There's a question about the website. Will the PowerPoint just presented be available on the website? And Gabriella, if you're not there, Daniel, I'm sure you've talked to her about that.
I believe that we can make the PowerPoint available. Yes.
Okay, great. And from our friend Joan Pomerink, she asks, is there a maximum amount of funds an applicant can request?
I'll take this question. So we have not established a maximum amount. Obviously, we have the amount that is available for the grants. We do understand that there may be different scale projects, and we will receive different applications requesting, different amounts for the grant. So we have not tried to establish a cap on that.
Okay. From Susan Vandermolen, we feel that our church is worthy of a City of Chicago landmark designation. How would we go about applying for this, please? The church is a contributing building to a national historic district and deemed architecturally significant.
So regarding the Adopt a Landmark program, as Dan just actually stated, and I think I'll just reiterate, in order to apply for the Adopt a Landmark Fund grant, you do need to be currently designated a local Chicago landmark. So that is the one part that is really important. It can't be a designation that is just being initiated or in the process. Obviously, we will have additional funding opportunities or funding round application opportunities. We anticipate at least annually one, pending obviously availability of funds in the Adopt a Landmark Fund itself. But the second part is that if you are interested in discussing landmark designation, we would be happy to have a separate conversation. If you can just reach out to us, there is a procedure for first evaluating whether a property meets criteria and then following through on steps through the landmarks ordinance of how to really go through those steps to get to a final recommendation reviewed by the commission and then on to city council. So we'd be happy to talk to you about that in more detail if you just reach out to us.
It's great that people are thinking along those lines. So glad to hear that. Daniel, I think this will go to you because this goes a little bit down in the weeds from Bishop Fitzpatrick. If we already have economic disclosure statement forms on file with the city, do we need to resubmit?
They just have to be current. They can be recertified if they're within, if they're more than, I believe, 6 months out. So hopefully that answers that question correctly.
Here's one that kind of coattails on that. If an applicant has questions about the EDS process, whom can they ask?
They can always send the email to the landmarks.org email, the landmarks@cityofchicago.org, and we can answer that, to the best of our ability. And if we can't, then we'll get you an answer. So
great. Okay, super. From Apostle Johnson, does the Adopt a Landmark require us to match funding?
I will respond to that. So it does not require it, but one of the evaluation criteria is to prioritize projects that do have other sources of funding so that the Adopt a Landmark grant is filling a gap in the budget. So you don't have to, it doesn't have to, but again, the evaluation of each application will be based on how many of the evaluation criteria you meet, and that's how the selections will be made.
Okay, great. And from some recent additions to our rank of landmarks, Mike and Laura Medina are asking, if an owner needs to pay to get renderings or drawings done in order to apply, are those costs able to be included in the Adopt a Landmark application for potential reimbursement?
So the costs are not reimbursed. I'm sorry, Dan, go ahead. But I just wanted to say that the soft costs that are associated with the drawings and preparing the project budget and moving on through the rest of the review are eligible for Adopt a Landmark grant. Hopefully that responded to the question. If Dan has anything else to add, please do.
I would just say that this is another down in the weeds type of question, and certain costs that are directly related to the project we have checked this with our law department, can be reimbursed. I mean, certain small costs directly related, if they were paid up front, can be reimbursed as part of an approved overall project. I hope that answers the question.
Pretty good detail there, Daniel. Another question from Michelle Montgomery. She says she's a condo owner in a landmark building with 40 condo units and no commercial spaces. Is my building eligible as a neighborhood anchor building?
The quick answer is, as we've stated, the buildings have to be designated Chicago landmarks or contributing buildings within designated Chicago landmark districts. The best way to find out if your building is a landmark is if you have access to the city's zoning map and the landmarks are highlighted in red. We can also look up the information for you. Feel free to email us again at the general landmarks email that I have given out. I hope that answers the question. We also on our website have lists of all of the designated individually landmarked buildings and landmark districts throughout the city as well, which you can get through chicago.gov/DPD. In fact, that's the best site for lots of this information, historic preservation, the zoning map, the Invest Southwest program, the qualified investment areas are all accessed through that chicago.gov/DPD.
Okay, thanks, Daniel. A detailed question from Bishop Fitzpatrick. What type of interior projects are fundable?
I can answer that one. The interior portions of spaces that are open to the public in general are what is an eligible cost. Needless to say, if you have, your project scope could be larger than that, but adopt a landmark funds themselves can only be used for portions of the interior that are open to the public. And like we said earlier too, that work must exceed normal maintenance type of work as well. That's for both the exterior and the interior.
Great.
I hope that helps.
And a question about process. Do you audit the projects to ensure the funds are being used in accordance with the guidelines?
Well, we kind of do two things. We sort of audit as we go, because one of the requirements of adopt a landmark agreements is that you do hire an inspecting architect that the city will then rely on to help review the status of the project and review the requests for draws of money. The way this works is we put our money into an escrow. If there's any additional money, you put your money into the escrow as well. And then as the work is completed, we the city rely on an inspecting architect that will review the progress and review the draws to make sure that everything is in accordance with the agreement and in accordance with the permit that was passed, etc. And then at the end of the project, when the project is all completed and paid out, we do go back to the commission and make an informational overview presentation on the project to let the commission know how the project turned out, the budget, and show them pretty pictures, etc.
Okay, great. And Antoinette gets right to the point and has a question. After the award announcements, how long will it take to get a check?
Dan, do you want me to attempt that one?
Sure.
I think I just want to go back a little bit to explain that, we will see obviously applications in various stages of drawing development or, project development. So some projects could come in with that are very ready to apply for a permit immediately. They're ready with full set of documents that can be presented to the Landmarks Commission for approval of the budget and the scope of work. As soon as that step happens, we work with you and law to basically complete the agreement, get all of the documentation needed executed. once the agreement is completed, then we go through the steps of transferring funds into an escrow account. An escrow account obviously needs to be established as well. So that is a process that will take a number of months. Maybe Dan can jump in at some point and say what would be kind of an average timeline for something like that. There may also be projects that do not yet have fully developed drawings that are ready to be presented to the Landmarks Commission. And sometimes in the past, the Department of Planning and Development has issued soft commitments to some applications where they need more time, I guess, to fully develop before they're ready to take the step of going to the Landmarks Commission. So that time really also needs to be considered as something that will need to be accounted for before we can even start, discussing the actual agreement itself. So that's probably answering part of the question. And then maybe Dan can give a bit more timeline, if possible, of what it generally takes to get through the process of getting the funds into the escrow account.
Sure, we are, I'll say we're getting better at getting through our various internal processes. But of course, at the end of the day, a check isn't delivered. Of course, money isn't delivered until the work is completed. But I think it's fair to say after we've gone to the commission with an approved scope and budget, we would be working very closely with each applicant on getting the necessary documents together in order to actually finalize and execute and adopt a landmark agreement. And that process, we have developed nice handy checklists of all the documents that are required as part of that process. There are insurance requirements. An escrow agreement is required. We want to make sure that the project is ready to go. A building permit is in hand or is imminent. But that's a little bit between the applicant and as well as the city in terms of that timeline. So, but hopefully we can get through that process in a relatively short amount of time. A couple 2 to 3 months is ideally. Maybe we can shorten that a little bit, but that's a rough approximation.
Dan, just a detailed question. Someone was asking, where do I get the submission requirements document you're addressing in the presentation? He's not seeing it as part of the 4-page application document.
It actually is indeed. It's page 3 of the application. What you saw on the PowerPoint was just simply a different font, but it is word for word of page 3 of the application.
Great, thanks for that clarification, Dan. Regarding the project budget and SOW, does the applicant identify an architecture engineering firm to monitor disbursements of escrow funds?
Yes, indeed. We would rely on you to get a third party, and it needs to be a third party independent architect to monitor the funds. Yes.
I would also add, it is something that we would want to make sure that we're in agreement on the selected entity.
Okay, great. Also, from Elizabeth, can you provide an idea of how competitive the Adopt a Landmark program has been in past funding rounds?
So I can respond to that. This new and improved Adopt a Landmark process was established really when the code changes in 2016, 2017. So we had first application round published in 2017. At that time, we were really limited to how many projects we could award grants to, because we only had just under $500,000 in the actual fund available to us. So the 2 projects were selected, that round. We had another application round in 2019. We also, in that period of time, had a larger project that received a commitment of funds. And then last year in 2020, due to various, pandemic and other happenings, we did not have an application round for the kind of citywide Adopt a Landmark Fund, but we did work and participated in the Together Now Fund program that was targeting small businesses that were negatively impacted by COVID and other issues. So it really depends on how many applications we get and how much we had available at any given application round in the actual fund. This year is the first time we have $6 million. That's a fairly substantial amount. So we would love to be able to, award every qualified applicant with a grant. The department would not necessarily be able to offer the full amount requested, but that is the goal, is to really spread the grant to as wide selection of projects as possible.
Okay, and it looks like we have one more question. I'm trying to type an answer to one of the last questions that came in through chat. Frank Lee is asking for grants over $250,000 in construction cost. I guess he's asking, do they require Davis-Bacon wages for construction tradesmen? You want to review those requirements? Yeah.
I can respond, Deanna, and then for grants over $250,000, as we stated, those do have to go through the city council approval process. That's important to note. And then, yes, as part of those size of grants, there are MBE, WBE, as well as local labor requirements. So city residency hours of the laborers on the job site. And then as well, there are prevailing wage requirements that are from the state of Illinois, as applicable. In addition, if there were other funds, if there were federal funds, then there Davis-Bacon and other provisions might apply as well. But for projects that are under $250,000, those conditions are not required.
We've got just a few more detailed questions. Carol Wilkins is asking whether it's required to live in the city of Chicago to participate.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Dan. Sorry.
No. Well, of course, I'll state the obvious again, that the property must be a city of Chicago landmark, and or individually designated, and or in a designated Chicago landmark district. In terms of, if you're wondering in terms of like labor requirements, as I was just stating, if projects are selected and are receiving over $250,000, then a certain percentage, I believe it's 50% or more of the labor hours on the job site must be by city residents. But in terms of does an applicant or an owner have to be a city resident? No.
Great, Dan, thanks. Looks like one last detailed question. Will projects not awarded be notified of your decision prior to award announcements? Deanna or Daniel, either of you guys.
We will notify every applicant once the department has made a decision. along with the commission. So yes, everyone will be notified.
Okay, great. That looks like that's all of the questions. Do you want to just do a little summary, maybe Daniel, and provide that email address where people could send other questions that they think of after this is over?
Of course. Thanks a lot. I guess I would just reiterate, applications are indeed due August 16th, 2021. That is a Monday. They're due by 4 o'clock. You can get the application. It's a really simple URL, chicago.gov/AAL. That is where you'll find an overview of the program, as well as the 4-page application itself with everything that we've gone over today. And then the email to ask us, you can ask us any questions at all, landmarks@cityofchicago.org. And that is also actually in the application itself and on that other webpage that I gave you. So hope that answers it.
Great. Deanna, do you want to take us out for today?
Well, thank you very much for attending. We really are looking forward to receiving these applications and looking forward to working with everyone on moving their projects forward. And again, if you have any questions, please reach out to us. Thank you.
Thanks.